You've got to try Monday.com. Go to Monday.com and manage all your team's work on a powerful platform that's easy to...
Hello, brother.
Hello.
Can you hear me?
Yep, hear you perfectly.
Okay, let me just adjust the settings here. Good, then let's just give it another minute for a few more people to join. How's life in Sydney?
Really beautiful. Had such a beautiful day. Both working and so I work full time. So I work with Sydney Uni, but I also have my own business as well. So yeah, after work, I was definitely working on my own business, which gives me a lot of joy.
Great.
Yeah.
How's
your day?
Yeah. Good. The tropical storm just rolled in, so let's hope the internet stays stable.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so welcome everyone. My name is Sebastian Bruno, for those of you that don't know me, one of the founders of ThaiVedic, School of Healing, Movement and Bodywork. Welcome to our throwback ThaiVedic, our live streams on Thursdays, where every week we have a different guest. And today's guest is someone that I really respect. Today with us we have Dr. Kaushik Ram. This man is a neuroscientist, an author, a keynote speaker, all-time fabulous human being. Welcome. Thank you for joining us, brother.
Such a pleasure, Sebastian. And thank you for that beautiful introduction.
Would you like to tell us a little bit about you and your journey? I know that there's a lot for you to share, but just to perhaps tell me a little introduction about you and what moves you and what is your passion?
Yeah, so my personal journey, I guess there's so many fragments of it that create the full picture. It's kind of like a puzzle piece, a little bit here, a little bit there, but it is leading towards a bigger picture. So basically, back in 2009, I had what people call a near-death experience. And from that experience, I became suddenly aware that there was something far greater than the mind. And so I, at that point, decided to change my career. At that time, I was really looking into being a documentary producer for wildlife. And I was studying biology, and I ditched that and went straight into studying neuroscience and trying to understand consciousness. That didn't lead me very far. Like science itself is a paradigm that becomes too small when you are trying to grapple with things that are beyond the mind. So from understanding the human brain from a scientific perspective, simultaneously I was searching in other areas as well. Going and visiting tribes. I went to the highlands of Papua New Guinea. I went to the Amazon. I went to Africa and visited the tribes there, the Kalahari, the Bushmen, the Masai Mara. And each tribe I would visit, I would learn something fundamental about our biology. And that was I guess the bridge between science and I wouldn't say spirituality, but like something far greater. And then I started putting the pieces together myself. And none of what I talk about comes from, say, plant medicine or yoga or any of the traditional spheres. I really wanted to go to such a fundamental level that it predates, what's written in the scriptures. It predates what, our ancestors thought of. It predates, human evolution. It's what is written in our own biology. And
Right.
so I started looking at, very, very fundamental levels of understanding the human physiology, I
Human
suppose.
physiology. So can you just tell me, perhaps in a very simple manner, if you can, what is neuroscience? What does that mean? What does it mean to be a neuroscientist?
That's a very tricky question because, for example, when I got into neuroscience, I was doing basically brain surgery on sharks. I was doing signal recording from the brain and trying to decipher what the shark brain was doing, and then translating it into machine learning, which is what AI is using. So that was me back, probably more than 10, 15 years ago. That was neuroscience for me then. And then for my PhD, I was actually looking at connectomics, which is the human genome version of brain science. So looking at it from a connectomics perspective, how is the brain connected? How is it wired genetically? How it's wired structurally? How is it wired functionally? All of that was sort of cutting edge probably 7 years ago. And now I think both fields have merit. And so what I work in now is very far from, ground roots neuroscience. It's more neuroscience and AI. And so at the moment, I'm working on a global consortium for federated learning in clinical imaging. I don't know if that makes any sense at all. But basically, in layman's terms, if someone goes to, say, a GP complaining of a headache, the GP might, request an MRI. So they go to the radiologist. The radiographer takes the brain scan, and then the radiologist looks at it, going, it might be this, it might be that, but we need a second opinion. So that goes to a neurologist. And this whole sort of clinical workflow might take days, sometimes even weeks, until the patient finally knows what the condition is. So instead of teaching more radiographers and neurologists to do this, we're training AI to do this, and AI does it in 3 seconds rather than 3 weeks. And not only for one brain, it does it for thousands of brains at a time, but not only in one hospital. If one hospital learns something, a hospital, say in Buenos Aires, learns something, simultaneously that learning is transferred to Belgium, and globally everything is learning simultaneously. So this is the kind of what neuroscience and AI has sort of merged into. So it's
so it does sound, for someone like me, that's completely outside of my field. It does sound like very heady. It sounds very brainy. Yeah, and yet by knowing you and knowing your work, what I find fascinating is that even though you have all this bulk of knowledge and ability to approach science with your mind, you use your body as a tool of investigating both the biology of oneself and consciousness itself. Is that correct?
Yeah, absolutely. So I've invested in the brain just as much as I've invested in the body. And in fact, about 15 years of studying the brain, I actually got bored of studying the brain. And so the body created a far more fascinating subject to explore. So yeah, definitely. And I don't look at the body in terms of, facts and figures. I explore it viscerally. So it's a very different exploration.
Yeah. Good. And the main topic that I would like us to approach today is something that I've heard from a few people. I heard from a few little some literature that I came across, but I heard a lot from you in the time that we got to spend together in Thailand. And this is the term known as flow state or states of flow. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell us a little bit about it? What does it mean? How does one tap into that? How can one experience such state?
Yeah, absolutely. So in my
Yeah.
social media timer on my phone, so after 15 minutes it just like clears me off social media. So that's probably why I
You
jumped
get
off
off
for
a
a
bit.
second. But yeah, so from my perspective, and this is from a neuroscience perspective, flow is just one, I guess, bandwidth of frequency in the brain. What that means is like there's alpha brain waves, beta brain waves, gamma, theta, and all these different brain frequencies. Flow is one of them, and it's in the gamma bandwidth. And it's been given a lot of hype, especially in recent years. People have been looking at it since the 1970s, especially with the first person who coined that in a, I guess, human psychology perspective was a guy called Mihaly Csikszentmihalyi. And he looked at flow from a psychological perspective. And a lot of the theories that he came up with was very advanced for that time, but probably not so much now. Lately, in the last probably in the last decade, there's a German neuroscientist called Arne Dietrich who's come up with a theory called transient hypofrontality, and that is something that has sort of filtered down into popular science by people like Steve Kotler, who's written books like Rise of Superman. And it's a very, I don't know if you've heard of this book, but it's a very diluted version of the neuroscience that, comes out in publications. But I think what happens is people read these books and they get very hyped up about, flow. And in fact, flow is something genuinely quite powerful.
So for someone that has no idea what we are talking about and just joined in, what is flow in a really simple manner? Is it something that most people at one point in their life have experienced and perhaps don't know that that's what's called?
Yeah, so just in fundamental sense, flow has probably 5 core characteristics. When someone is in flow, they feel that what they're doing is effortless. It happens like you don't even know how it's happening, but it happens effortlessly. Another characteristics is it happens automatically. You don't have to think about it. Often you enter flow and then you realize you're in flow, or sometimes you realize in retrospect. It harnesses what I call peak creativity. So it allows you to go beyond your cognitive threshold. So like some people sort of loop in their thoughts all the time, but when they're in flow, they sort of jump out of that loop and they're accessing something far greater. There's also a feeling of timelessness. Sometimes it feels like hours may go by, and you realize, wow, like time has just vanished. It's disappeared. So these are some of the characteristics that people will describe when they're in flow. So
basically what people sometimes call being in the zone.
Yeah, being in the zone, being in flow. It's very much an experiential thing. So, and that's why people really hype it up, because it's often, they think it's beyond their control. So a lot of guys who sort of come into flow research, they probably have a background in action adventure sports. So either, mountain biking or
surfing.
Surfing. Yeah. So they catch a glimpse of flow, you know, like they do this sport, they get this high, the adrenaline kicks in, and whoa, like they get that peak experience. But for me, flow is not dependent on an activity. Flow happens even, say, in a conversation, or in sex, or in, you know, like if you're writing poetry, like it can happen. It doesn't need an external stimulus. And this is where a lot of, I think, flow theory goes wrong, is they depend on some external input to do this. But basically, in the brain, what happens is when you calm and relaxed, the brain goes into alpha state. Alpha is basically when you calm, relaxed, but alert. So it's not some lazy state where you sort of like, you know, become a couch potato. It's like calm, alert, and relaxed. And then what happens is the thoughts, because the redundant thoughts, basically the default thoughts that happen in your mind start to subside, your brain starts connecting new dots, and dots that perhaps it hasn't seen before. And sometimes we feel it within ourselves, and it may feel like something like intuition. Intuition for me is like when the body has connected the dots, but the mind hasn't quite comprehended it yet. So it's like, oh, I've got this feeling, you know? And then when the dots connect, that's when there's this global firing of the brain, and that's called gamma binding, and that is what is flow, you know, like action and awareness merge, and pow, like you enter the state, and like it's exhilarating. But what people often miss is that you can be in this state all the time, and all you have to do is be calm, relaxed, and just be connected. So basically, what I'm saying is, if you are centered in this moment, you are responsive to what's happening around you. And that, to me, is the ultimate state of flow.
Yeah. So how different is a flow state from a meditative state? Or what are the correlations that you see there? Very different?
Yeah, very different. So in meditation...
Would it be the fun factor?
Huh?
Could it be the fun factor?
No, meditation is almost always associated with the alpha frequency. So if you are on any of the mind-aware devices, or if you recording brain activity, your brain goes into alpha. And the more alpha activity there is, you know, the deeper your meditation can be. And you can go even deeper. You can go into theta and delta states, which is going into sleep states. But if you are consciously aware in those states as well, that's probably what people enter when they're going to say something like yoga nidra.
I love the fact that you touched on intuition and how important it is as a I don't know if we should call it the biological mechanism. And it's something that we talk a lot in our ThaiVedic trainings. Even though there's a body of knowledge that we approach it intellectually, we put great focus on developing our ability to listen at a more subtle level, and to listen to that small nuances, that data, that information that is always available, but perhaps not so easy due to the noisy environments that we're in, and the noisy environment of our minds ourselves. Not so easy to listen to. And the intuition, to me, feels that it's very much a whisper from the body. This gentle information that is always there, always available, and yet requires a certain level of training to tune in and to be able to perceive it, to listen to it, to connect with it. And this is something that it's not taught in schools. I didn't learn this growing up in school. And yet, I think I've heard you say something like this, that cognitively we are so evolved, and that the current educational system puts so much emphasis on memorization and just working the brain muscle, that by the time that people leave school, they are very much stuck in their heads and very disconnected from their bodies.
Yeah.
And this sounds to me that moving away from intuition, moving away from being able to be present and centered and listen to that small nuances where very often that's where the magic lies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I guess you highlighted the keyword quite a few times for intuition, which is listen. Listening is, for many, quite difficult. Firstly, because there's so much mental chatter, mental commentary happening. And secondly, they are so disconnected from their own bodies. So they've actually checked out from their bodies. And combine those two factors together, there's a complete disconnection that happens between brain and body. And this is where so much indecision arises, so much confusion arises. People don't know what they want. They don't know what direction they're going. They're confused about their life. They're frustrated. They're, like they lack passion. They lack direction. They lack drive. For men, testosterone drops. Like there's so many things that are linked to not having an internal ecosystem that is well functioning. So it really blows my mind how disconnected we become from our bodies, and the medical system doesn't help there either. The education system mines our brains for resources, and so resources that is relevant for industry, it mines our brain's capacity and creates resources such as accountants, it creates resources such as lawyers, it creates resources that, engineers or whatever. And that's why we say HR, human resource. That's basically what the education system is creating. And then we have HR managing these human resources. And the interesting thing is the healthcare system, when they look at the body, they don't want to bring it to balance. Instead, they're pumping it with chemicals when the body is already out of balance. So put it this way, if you had a car accident and your car, the chassis sort of crumbled or like became very misaligned, and you take it to the mechanic and say, hey, I want to align the chassis, like everything's sort of out of place. And the mechanic says, oh no, I'll just change the tires and I'll rotate it in a way that, allows you to move forward. That's what, the drug industry is doing. It's just providing symptom-based solutions to basically keep the body moving, but it's not the symptoms that need correcting, it's the overall structure that is fucked, you know?
Yeah,
so
it's like trying to find the solution with the same mind that has created the problem.
Yeah. So that's really where, when I talk about the nervous system, it's really about creating an internal ecosystem that is really efficient and functioning harmoniously with all other organs. So when you need to go to sleep, your body can relax into rest. When you need to be active, your body can be responsive to the moment and, be active. It's an agile body. It's not a body that is not responsive.
So, an intelligent body. Yeah.
Exactly.
And it's interesting because as far as intelligence goes, it seems that so often we look at intelligence as being a very brain thing, a very mind thing. We look at IQ. And last week we had Romy, remember Romy from the Bay?
Yeah.
She was our guest here and we talked about emotional intelligence. And a lot of what I hear you say now, I hear it as the intelligence of the body. And to touch in the nervous system, it's, again, fascinating how highly intelligent the body and the nervous system is, how the nervous system is constantly concerned about one thing and one thing only, which is your survival.
Yeah.
And it speaks in a language that is, in a way, quite as complex as the nervous system is. The language that it speaks is quite simple, it's quite basic, right? It uses
absolutely.
very primordial feelings. It's fear, it's pain. This is the language of the nervous system, correct?
Exactly, exactly. So because it's so simple, it's been hardwired into our biology since the evolution of the spine, which happened in fishes. So this is something that I started formulating early on when I said I was doing brain surgery on sharks. This is where these ideas were born like 15 years ago. And since then, I've been building upon it for all this time. And you're absolutely right. While the brain has all this different frequency, alpha, gamma, and all these different networks that are sort of coexisting or trying to coexist, the body itself is binary. It only functions under two states. One is fight or flight, the other one is rest and restorative. And that's it. Mm-hmm. Like, it knows nothing else. Yeah. So when the basic mechanics is so simple, it's also very simple to train. But so often we go about it the other way. We try to train the mind, and it's such a complex organ, and everyone's experiences are different. But for the body, everyone's body will function the same way, and it's very easy to train. So that's why I invest more in training the nervous system than, digging into someone's psychology or past life experiences, or, there's so many ways we can go about this, but I choose, what is simple, efficient, and just is, fail-proof.
So help me out here. If I want to get out of my thinking and more into the feeling, if I want to move a little bit away from the busyness of my mind and feel a bit more anchored and stable in my body, if I want to allow or create circumstances where I can experience more flow states, being in the zone, can you give me a couple of simple pointers, suggestions that I can implement? Understanding that flow state is not something that I do, rather something that takes place. And yet there's something that I can do to try to create the circumstances for that flow to take place, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. And it's very simple. I call this the Body Audit, and it's very, very simple. There's only 3 steps. First is your posture. And often, we think of posture as, like I got to sit up straight, got to be, like the yogic culture has this sort of rigid, straight spine posture and all of this. For me, posture is the interaction between tension and relaxation. And so how relaxed is your posture in this moment? And the only way to do that is through your breath. Use breath to calm down the nervous system and be relaxed. And so the first step is your posture. Are you relaxed in your current state? And if you're not, use breathing to relax that. And when I say breathing, there's a very simple association between breathing and heart rate. So when you inhale, the heart rate rises. When you exhale, the heart rate slows down. So if you just prolong the exhale, your nervous system will naturally relax. And on my online courses, I go into deep detail into all these processes. But for someone who, like, breathing is quite natural. If you just breathe in through the nose, out through the mouth, prolong the exhale, it's just as simple as that. So
and that's quite intuitive. It's quite intuitive because that's generally what we say to someone that is sort of freaking out. Hey, take a deep breath in. Regardless of what kind of training or education they have, that comes very intuitive.
Yeah. So, so first, posture. Second is where's your attention? The mind, as everyone knows, is a very useful servant, but a dangerous master. So we gotta put the mind's attention on something that is far greater than itself. And for me, that is the heart. So always guiding the attention of the mind into the heart. And what I simply mean by that is, you can focus on external things. I can focus on what's around me in this room. But the moment I guide my attention to my heart, I'm seeing my surroundings through almost, through my body. It's like I'm seeing with my body and I'm feeling with my eyes. There's a transition that happens. And so now I feel very in touch with my body. There's a brain-body integration that happens. And now my body, my heart is responsive to this moment. And that is what flow is.
Wow.
So first posture.
I love to hear you say this about the heart as a scientist, because so often, and especially in the circles that I move through, it has become such a cliche thing to say or to hear people talking about be in the heart, feel into your heart, listen to your heart. And yet, from a scientific point of view, as you're saying, it's our most coherent field, and it's our most sensitive, receptive mechanism. Am I correct to say that? The heart perceives everything before anything else.
Yeah, absolutely. And the reason I say the heart is responsive to this moment is because it cannot be otherwise. It's so intimately linked with our breathing that the moment that anything happens around us, it changes our breathing. And that's why when our breathing changes, our heart rate changes. And so when we wear like the Fitbit devices or anything that monitors our heart rate, we are measuring heart rate variability, HRV. And that is the moment-to-moment fluctuation in our heart rate. So the heart is inevitably responsive to this moment.
Wow.
So it cannot be otherwise.
I love it. I love it. There is such a different way of saying the same thing. And this is what we often say in ThaiVedic. We use more the language of the elements, and we start all our treatments or all our practices by connecting with the element of space, ether, which body-wise very much connects with our heart. So we have this gesture that everyone knows of bringing our hands together, merging duality in front of our heart center into that space of oneness, that space of knowing, where our decisions can come from a well-informed, centered space. This is perhaps a more new age or more, hippie lingo. And yet, it seems that it's very much what you were talking about, just with different words.
Yeah. So you highlighted something really important there, decision. It's coming from a centered space. What does that mean? When you are connected to your heart, it gives rise to what we say high vagal tone. Vagal tone is basically the strength of communication between brain and body. And when that is high, it means there's a strong integrity between brain and body. So any decision that you're making is a full body decision. And so when you're so decisive, you say, okay, this is what I'm going to do. It's not related to what anyone else is thinking or what, society thinks or what you feel. It's coming from something far greater than you. And then you can boom, like, this is what I want to do. The decision is independent from you. And that's why we call it intuition, because we can't synthesize it in our mind. It comes through you. And the moment you surrender to that, like, that is for a big reason why there's so much conviction, so much power associated with, the decision. For me, that comes through intuition and something that I'm trying to analytically think or trying to work out or getting frustrated about. That's why I truly rely on listening for decisions.
Yeah, when that answer comes from the body, from the heart, what we call perhaps that fuck yeah, when you get Yes, without a doubt. It's a whole body yes or full body no. Whatever it is, there's no margin for doubt. It's so crystal clear. Nice one.
Yeah. So it's really, really powerful. And I guess I also make a distinction between intuition and instinct. Instinct for me is a little bit deeper. I often talk about intuition of the heart because we are listening to the heart. You know, the mind's attention is on the heart and it's tuning into the heart so that it can respond to what's happening around us through love. And then for instinct, this is something a little bit more primordial.
And it sounds a bit more programmed, something that you can actually program through extensive practice. Yeah?
Very much.
Habitual patterns that become automatic.
Yeah. So instinct, it can be trained. And often we say gut instinct, because it is related to the gut. When, for example, so we meet a stranger and we, they give off an energy that we kind of like, we don't like, we become suspicious. Sometimes we even feel disgusted by it, Disgust is a gut response. If an animal bites into something that is rotten, it'll feel disgust.
Yes.
So this is a very instinctual state. And there's so many instincts that are in our body that we may not be aware of. For example, I've got this candle holder here in front of me. So this is a little bit heavy, but if I lift this up with my right hand, my hand that was holding it stays stable. But if you were to lift it from my hand, there would be an upward perturbation of my other hand. And this is really because the information coming from my right hand is going into my brain and creating a downward force on my left hand. So the hand stabilizes. But when you lift it, that information is available to you. So my hand rises and, I have to visually correct that stability. So proprioception is an instinct. There's so many instincts that is hardwired. I mean, instinct by its very nature is hardwired into our biology. And what you can do is start revealing these instincts and start training it. And this is why it becomes so powerful, because once you start training your instincts, then you don't need to rely on it cognitively. So I don't have to think about it. It kicks in by itself. So for what I teach, I don't want people to go away with a lot of information going on. I've got to apply this to my life. Most don't. Instead, what I do is I train their body, I train the nervous system, and that way the body learns it. And when they walk off, if they're getting stressed, because I've changed the hardwiring of the body, stress becomes a trigger for relaxation rather than the traditional fight or flight response.
Yeah.
And so the body has changed its mechanics.
So basically, it's an upgrade.
Yeah.
You basically do an upgrade to the operating system, right?
Pretty much.
Because I imagine that those instincts, they were created for a reason, and I'm sure that at some point in time, they were absolutely necessary. Perhaps our survival was dependent on it. So these are very strong programs that, like you say, are hardwired into our biology. But perhaps there's instincts, some of these programs are still operating now at a point where perhaps they're not really needed. And they do take a lot of energy and a lot of resources in order to keep on operating. And the stress that translates into the body, into the nervous system. Very often I see people that come onto the mat for a session being absolutely exhausted without understanding why. And these are generally the kind of people that if I lift their arm up and let go, the arm stays up. You know what I mean? And then I ask them,
Yeah.
how relaxed are you from 0 to 10? And often they say 9. I'm super relaxed. So there's these mechanisms that are operating, these programs that are just creating action when action is not needed, is not called for. This is just an example from my practice where I see these habitual patterns, these instincts, these programs running wild and consuming a lot of resources that could be used for something that is much more nurturing or just efficient for the moment.
No, you're absolutely right. When you say consuming a lot of resources, yeah, you're so right on that, because I mean, if you look at the brain, it is a very expensive structure to run. It consumes 20% of your metabolic energy at rest. Just think about that. It weighs only 2% of your body mass, and it's using 20% of your energy. That's 10 times more than any other organ in your body. And that's at rest. Imagine what's happening when, you know, for a lot of people, they're running on overdrive, you know, running on frustration, running on exhaustion, running on panic. So the other beautiful thing is when you relax the body, all that mental faculties are released from, you know, the chronic thinking that happens. And so suddenly you have all this free space to do whatever the fuck you want with, you know.
Yes.
It's not running the, you know, the cycles of pain that we go through. It's not running the cycles of fear or, you know, self-deprecation or anything that we, you know, criticize ourselves on. Like, you're free of that. And we don't need to do it cognitively. We don't need to do it through positive affirmations or anything. We just direct the attention of the mind into the heart. And that takes care of itself.
Nice.
Yeah.
Let me just invite the people that are listening right now. At any point, if you want to ask questions, please just type them, and as soon as I see them, I'll read them out loud. So, where can people learn more about these methods? What kind of resources do you have available for people to explore a little bit more on this topic? Perhaps literature, programs. What do you suggest? What is it that you have on your sleeve that can help us to bring more flow into our lives and more connection with the heart?
So obviously, first point of call is my website, which is basically my name, Kaushik Ram. If you just Google search that, a lot of information will come up. I've got online courses, and the course is really broken down into, I guess, four parts. The first is understanding fundamentals about survival and how the mechanics of survival works. Then I go into a little bit of psychology and how the mind works and the scaffolding of our subconscious. And then I go a little bit deeper. I go from the subconscious down into levels below it, which is the nervous system. And then I talk about the biology. And then we discard all of that knowledge and we go into practice. So the practices are very much movement based. And that way we teach the body directly rather than through, you know, giving people information. Which
right, out of the thinking into the feeling. I like that.
Yeah. So it's very experiential. A lot of it requires partner exercises, and you might relate to this yourself. Like, it's easy enough to say, oh, I read something, I understand it. But when you are doing it physically, if you haven't understood it, it's very obvious. So you might see this in your own teachings as well. Where,
absolutely. I would say that's very much the difference between knowledge and wisdom. Knowledge can be acquired through these means, through, you know, watching a video, listening to a talk, reading a book, and that's important and relevant. But wisdom comes from direct experience, and direct experience very much takes place in the body.
Yeah, yeah. And so that's how I break down the online course. I have a book as well, which is called Hidden World, The Inside Story of the Soul. And this is something I wrote in Thailand, where I met you guys.
And when you were living in a cave, here's a scientist that wrote a book while he was living in a cave in the jungles of Thailand. Wow.
Yeah, and I mean, adding to that, living in that cave was the height of my human experience, because you become so in tune with nature. It's like even a leaf falling off a tree has meaning. It showed me the direction of the wind, you know, like the process of lighting fire. I felt so much gratitude towards the process that by the time I prepared a meal, I was like overwhelmed with gratitude, you know, like it was as if like I filled myself up so much that I didn't even need to eat anymore. Like the whole experience of living in nature aligned even my sleeping patterns, which changed. I would sleep like usually during the day when it's warm, and I just, you know, pass out in my hammock, and then at night when it's cooler, like my body would rise up quite suddenly, and it's almost as if like ideas were like barbarically like coming into my head, and I'd literally have to just jump up and start writing, you know. And so that's really where my book was written through. Is like almost from a dream state, and that's why it feels so pure, because it wasn't coming from me, it was coming from somewhere beyond me.
Wow.
Yeah.
I'm just reading through the comments, and Marcella Yogini just pointed out that so many books have been written in that cave. A few other friends wrote books in that cave, so that's quite fascinating, huh?
Yeah. So the cave was, you know, I sort of acquired the custodianship of it from Richard, who you guys know as well. And yeah, so I was the guardian of the cave for a little while, and then
so basically you position yourself
as well.
You just position yourself in a situation, in a space where there was no option for you but to drop into a space of centeredness, connected, listening to your body and how it was responding to the environment. I would imagine that states of flow were reoccurring several times while you were in that period. I mean, you just said that the book almost came beyond you, so it wrote itself. That sounds like a state of flow in itself.
Yeah, and when you are so intimate with nature, flow is inevitable. Like it's not even a concept. It's not something that you try to acquire.
The state of being.
It is a state of being. And I guess in Western society, because we are so distant from nature, that means that, you know, we are so distant to our own nature, and therefore with our own instincts and intuition. And that disconnect really has led to so many chronic conditions. When I mentioned vagal tone, when vagal tone is really high, the strength of communication between brain and body is strong. When it's low, what we find is there's a lot of disease, both mental, physical, and physiological. So it's all a product of a disconnection from our own bodies.
Beautiful. My friend, it's time that we start to wrap up this conversation. I love to hear you speak, even though there's words and terms, as you passionately start to talk about all this knowledge that you have. Some things are a little bit, fly a little bit over my head, are beyond my ability to comprehend. And yet your message is just so simple and to the point. My favorite scientist, basically telling me, connect with your heart. Drop into that natural state of being. And this is a beautiful, beautiful message that is available for everyone to comprehend. And I really salute you for that. Thank you.
Yeah, an absolute pleasure, Sebastian. And yeah, that is my message. So summarized so succinctly, all I'm saying is basically stay in your hearts, and
Stay in
as
your
long
heart.
as love is, consuming you, there's nothing that is impossible.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
So check Dr. Kaushik Ram on social media. You can follow him here on Instagram. His website, kaushikram.com, correct?
Dr. Kaushik
Have a
Ram.
look
Yeah.
at his book, phenomenal book, Written in a Cave. If you don't follow ThaiVedic or Instagram, Facebook, YouTube, please go and have a look, see what we're up to. A little call to our online course that is now available, that very much resonates with everything that Dr. Kaushik just shared with us here today. Different language, same body, same heart. So thank you so much for sharing your wisdom with us. Thank you everybody for making the time to tune in. To be continued.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Sebastian, and
Thank
for
you very
everyone
much.
who joined in and listened. Yeah.
Hi, my friend. Thank you very much.
Cool. All right. Bye-bye.
Bye.